It's July 15, Ukraine Media Center continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Shepenko, and now we will be talking about this year's harvest and the way it's happening around the regions of Ukraine. What are the problems faced by the agrarians? And joining us in the studio is Denis Marchuk, Deputy Chairman of the Ukrainian Agri Council. And availing myself of this opportunity, I would like to greet you with the Day of Ukrainian Sovereignty and to thank the Security and Defense Forces for giving us the opportunity to hold events like this. Yeah, I fully support you because the armed forces are in front, the agrarians support the food supplies. We are going to make it. We are going to survive. Well, I share your optimism. The harvesting campaign is underway. So what are the figures that you may voice now? What are the first results? And if I may, let me ask you about the different groups. Well, the situation is not easy. The agrarians are supposed to work in extra difficult conditions when it comes to the front lines. Is the permanent challenge, the strikes by the enemy directly on the people who work in the fields. They consciously destroy the harvest that is being harvested. There are significant losses, and another impact is the drought that was existing in the southern regions. The consequences are pretty serious in Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Dnipropetrovsk regions, and now it's moving to Kirovograd region. So basically, all over Ukraine, the weather conditions play an important role. However, we still state that, in fact, within the period of active field works, more than 18 regions are already in the fields. More than 3 million tons of the cereal crops were harvested, so we're working in sustainable mode. I cannot say we're falling out of schedule, but what we still can state that due to the change in weather conditions, there are unequal results in terms of comparison to those expected by the agrarians. But when it comes to cereal crops and the bean crops, I think we will come to the amount of 20-25 tons, which is a pretty good result, and it may improve our export potential for external markets, because when it comes to, for example, wheat, the annual consumption is 6 million, and if we achieve 22 million, the amount will be sufficient for covering internal need and export. Well, when it comes to different regions, there was already mention of different regions that were affected by the weather. For example, June was pretty cold in Ukraine, where the situation is more or less stable, and where is it the worst. The worst situation is in Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Dnipropetrovsk region. In the north, the situation is more or less. The central Ukraine is also in the fields. The northern regions, not yet. I think that they will arrive at the fields by the end of July. Well, in Kherson, the crops are already being harvested. But what is the situation there? Due to the drought, the cereal crops were almost destroyed, and they've sown the sunflower there. But again, due to the high temperature, some of the agrarians had to destroy the sunflower and to reprofile their fields. So again, talking about these regions, we don't have to leave them on their own. Their work is not over. They will need to prepare to sow in the winter crops. And as a Ukrainian Agricultural Council, we've addressed the government to extend financial aid per hectare for the agrarians. We don't have a positive response so far. We are being told that there are 579 loans in Ukraine, but we're talking about the frontline territories where the banks are a little bit low to cooperate, and there is no pledge that agrarians could offer as collateral in terms of loans. The state insurance should be working, but we don't have it contemplated by the budget. So now that we're in the middle of active negotiations, we see the information about new cabinet of ministers about to be shaped shortly, and the 2026 budget is going to be considered soon, and it's important to have the state insurance for agrarians contemplated within the budget of 2026. It will be important for the south of the territory that has been affected by the enemy strikes and by weather conditions. Well, in continuation of our talks about the frontline territories, what is your assessment of this year's losses inflicted by the enemy on the harvest? Well, in Donetsk region, the losses of the farmers within the period of full-scale invasion are more than 6 billion hryvnia. The sowing areas decreased multifold, and through the due to the offensive operations of the enemy, we can see that those farmers that have sown their fields, they had to relocate, but again, they cannot take their land with them. Their main resources are still remaining there in the fields. And using the example of our association, one of the farmers who had 4 million hectares of land, they just left everything and left. And in this context, we keep reminding and we keep asking the office of the president of Ukraine, to support those manufacturers, at least by signing the law to rescind the loans of those farmers that fled from the temporarily occupied territories, because when the law was adopted in the second reading, we cannot seek to have it signed, because it would be a very significant contribution. It would be a support that the farmers are expecting, are waiting for. Those who were staying in their regions even during the most challenging of the times, but had to leave the territory, which is still under Ukrainian control, but due to the challenge of the enemy, they don't have opportunity to work there. Well, other challenges related to the working hands and the material, year by year, you keep mentioning that the agrarian sector, agricultural sector, was severely affected by the war. So have you been able to find a balance? It's difficult to find a balance because the mobilization is still underway. We appreciate the conditions set up for the agrarian businesses. The booking of 50% of the personnel, but again, it's year 4 of the war. The percentage that could be preserved is getting lower and lower, and during the critical moments, during the harvesting, when more material is supposed to be involved, when more working hands are supposed to be involved, we can see that significant lack of working hands. But again, all of the farmers, based on their needs, they try to involve either veterans by creating the conditions so that they could drive their material, for example, or IDPs who are not mobilized due to certain reasons, but who can physically work and help, or those tender but strong Ukrainian women who work on par with the men, fulfilling their job. So these are the circumstances that we work in. I would say that the number of under-received personnel, before the full-scale invasion, the lack of personnel was about 10%, and now this indicator has grown up to 30%. Okay, but is it lower comparing to the year 23? The lack of the personnel. Well, definitely the number of people is getting smaller. Has the situation improved? No, quite on contrary. The more is the percentage of the people that are getting mobilized, the more is the percentage of the people that the businesses are missing. Well, when it comes to other problems such as elevators, fuel, material, well, the biggest challenge for the elevators is the strikes by the enemy, because the strikes are being performed in a chaotic way, and on top of the human death, on top of the destruction of infrastructure, also the agricultural infrastructure is being affected in Donetsk, Sumy, even Dnipropetrovsk region. And again, is the additional losses that we add to the total losses born during the full-scale invasion. And using this opportunity, I would like to urge the farmers who become the hostages of this situation, those who lose their farms due to the combat operations, including in Kharkiv region, you can address us. We have the technique to calculate, to document everything. We can document it in video and audio formats so that after the war we can even as association or separate farmers to report about our losses and to submit for compensation. Well, no one's gonna do it now, but in future we are going to seek that money to be compensated to the farmers who were affected. Well, given the difficult weather conditions and your expectations of the shortage of harvest, are you expecting the food prices to be growing? Well, if we check the food basket for Ukrainians, well, the prices were growing by all of the groups of goods, and this season is no exclusion. Even more due to the inflation in June, the prices have started growing. However, the food inflation is even bigger. So if we have the consumer inflation at the rate of 14%, the food inflation is within the tunnel of 23-25%. So it's not comparable to the growth of salaries. The foods, they take a significant share of the salaries of Ukrainians, but now during the summer we see more supply, specifically when it comes to the vegetables. They are going to get cheaper by the end of July. When it comes to dairy products, well, the situation has improved a little bit, but it has deteriorated for the farmers. The price for the dairy products have fallen within 2%, and for the farmers from whom they procure, the price has dropped 20%, and is the result of shortening of our export potential to Eurozone. So evaluating situation for the time being, I would say that the situation may be the most difficult when it comes to meat products. Their prices is not falling because the equivalent of fodder is pretty pricey because of the high prices of the cereal crops. The bread demonstrates the growth dynamics within 1.5 to 2% per month. So we'll see by the end of the year the bread growing in price almost 20-25%, and we hope there will be enough precipitations and sufficient sun. And the situation with the vegetables during the season, I mean the end of July and August, will be better than the last year, and we'll get the better price because last year, as a result of the drought, the loss of the farmers was about 40%. People were expecting to see a lower price during this period. And when it comes to the exports, the effect of the agreement with the European Union has expired. So what are the new challenges for the agrarian?
Challenges for agricultural workers. In terms of agreement itself, this are better numbers than the 6th June, because there was discussions undergoing, and the results were announced just recently. And the sensitive products, they will be showing a little worse numbers than the same indicators last year or before the full-scale invasion. However, at the same time, we're seeing the announcement from the part of Poland or Czech Republic that are trying to reassess these indicators, trying to imply that Ukraine is causing some instability on the market in the European Union. However, due to these forbidding actions, Ukraine is losing a lot of finance. It's measured up to 3 billion hryvnias, and we are paying a lot of attention to communication with the national associations of the European Union, like France, Italy, Poland, and we are trying to persuade them that what they are trying to push is based on myths, basically disinformation from the Russian Federation, which shows that that a country that is undergoing very difficult times, war times, is trying to cope with these challenges and trying to basically cover its own cost. After all these arguments being put on the table, they are actually going to compromise. What about the markets that we already have? Are they capable of being transformed for transformation? Well, during the full-scale invasion, the Russian Federation meddled, threaded on the territories, and a lot of territories were lost temporarily, and that's why we are not capable of competitive operation on the international market. However, due to the stability that we are having thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, we are actually little by little, we are developing these domains, these fields. The trade in the agricultural sector. We are launching agricultural attaches, representatives, and this way we're capable of pushing our agenda in the during the meetings and discussions with our international partners. Any questions from the journalists? Thank you, Mr. Denise. I will remind you we're talking about the harvesting this year and what challenges are posed before the agricultural workers. And stay with us. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.